The November 29th, 2010 meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Esposito. Here. Mr. Hanna. Here. Chairman Howland.
Here.
Mr. Monroe. Here. Mr. McCann. Here.
Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
No, sir.
Is there anyone present who is not signed up to speak but would like to address the committee at this time? The first thing on our agenda is I'd like to introduce Kate Bennett. Is she here? Yes. Oh, hi, Kate. I would like to introduce Kate Bennett, Executive Director of the Rochester Museum and Science Center, who is here to give us a presentation on the Rochester Museum and Science Center.
I welcome this opportunity to be here to talk to you, to thank you for the ongoing support from Monroe County. It's very critical. I know that these are not easy budget times, and they probably never will be easy budget times. But for me, we play a very clear, important role in this community, and I want to make sure that you're aware of it and that we build on it. You know that the museum was started as a municipal museum. We were a city agency back in 1912. Going forward into 1968, after the riots, CGR and some others did some studies and found that the library, the Monroe County Library, the zoo, and the Rochester Museum and Science Center were really serving a county audience rather than just a city audience. The city had new needs that they absolutely needed to take care of, and the county said to the three organizations, we will take you on as agencies. Our trustees at the time said to the county, we are also interested in becoming a public-private partnership. So instead of our becoming an agency of the county, as the zoo and the library did, the museum asked to go it alone so they could do some more fundraising and some more work as a public-private partnership. The trustees thought that held a very good, it was a very good formula for our community. In 1968, the county support was 2/3 of our budget. Today, the county support of $900,000 is approximately 15% of our annual budget. So if you think about it, our earned revenue has gone up, our contributions have gone up in order to serve the community. We continue to transform exhibition halls. That's the most important thing we're doing right now, is to make sure that the experiences people have at the museum and in their school classes are first rate. The reason we're doing this is that the economic future of this community depends on people having enthusiasm for science and technology. You've all heard the statistics that in 5 years or in 10 years, 2 out of 5 jobs will be science and technology based. Without people being enthusiastic about going into these various areas, we will be in trouble. As a community, we won't have the people. We already have a problem finding the people to work at high-tech jobs. And as you know, 46% graduation rate from high school in the city does not bode well for people going on. And in fact, in order to go on in math and science in college, you have to be in a situation where you've taken 4 years of math and you've taken 4 years of science in order to make that next step when you go to college. So we've got to get the kids when they're young, and that is one of the the things that we do well at the museum is that we're a welcoming place. We have tons going on, and people come and they find enthusiasm for that learning. So what we're all about is making sure that there's a passion for inquiry, invention, and learning through fun, hands-on experiences. When we have brought in major exhibitions, right now the CSI exhibition, people at MCC and Crest tells me that it is the number one reason, that CSI TV show, of why kids are going on into forensics today. It's been really a interesting line of work, and it's really it's hopping now as a piece. We've had the genome exhibit, we had the brain exhibit last summer, we had the Our Body exhibit, and we're going to continue to do these kinds of exhibitions. And while we do them, we make sure that kids in the community who can't afford to come in and their families can come in for free. This past year, we distributed 12,000, we had 12,000 people come to the museum to visit for free. Because they were members of the Community Partner Pass program, where we distribute to 300 community-based organizations our passes. They come back to the museum. So that's an important piece. We do our best to bring in school classes. You've all heard that schools, their budgets are being cut, and that it's very difficult for the superintendents to make the decisions that kids should come to the museum. Well, our trustees stepped up to the plate and said, let's make a trustee fund. And this past year, we had 18,000 school kids come in for free, and with their busing paid for as well, in order to come to the Museum and Science Center. So that's really key, because without those kinds of help, we know people aren't going to come. And you know, the city kids in particular, and the school kids in general, really are the ones who need the enthusiasm. The teachers in our school districts throughout Monroe County do a fabulous job, but not many of them are prepared in science. Not many of them walk into the classroom with any kind of background in that. You know that their whole focus right now is on literacy, and it's on math. Now, since math is the language of science, it's a good thing. But even though every time we talk to the teachers, they need more help. They really have a hard time making math fun for the kids who don't think that math is fun. And I can see by some of the nods that maybe you didn't all think math was the most fun subject you took. But it is a language, and you need to know it, and Rochester citizens need to know it. So we're all about workforce development, and we're really interested in doing what you think is important. So if you have ideas of initiatives we need to take forward. This past year, we worked with the Stormwater Coalition to bring forward a whole initiative on clean water. We have great new exhibits now at the museum that teaches Monroe County citizens how to protect our water supply. It's very important. We want all the fifth graders to go home and teach their parents, don't use so much fertilizer, pick up after your dog, the kinds of things that I know that the county needs communicated, we're communicating at the Museum and Science Center. I also want to talk about tourism before I wrap up. Our exhibitions that we bring in, whether it's the Our Body exhibition in 2007 or the Titanic exhibit or the CSI exhibit, they bring in out-of-town visitors. It's more than 20% of our audience comes from beyond the 11-county region for these special exhibitions. So that's really terrific, because I know they fill up their gas tanks while they're here, and I know that they're going out to dinner, because every time we've done economic studies of this, we've found that to be true. So we're eager to play a role with you in making sure that this community becomes all it can be in the future. And without helping our kids and the families get enthusiastic about math and science, we're going to have a harder time doing what we need to do. So again, we're willing partners. We're interested in knowing your ideas, and we greatly appreciate your support because we know it is not easy to fund us, but we appreciate the longevity going back to 1968 when the county said we'll take on the museum and the library and the zoo. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we've got a busy evening tonight with the budget presentation, but Executive Director Bennett has offered to answer questions if anybody on the floor has them, so I did want to give her a few minutes to do that. Do we have any questions? Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
That I was going to bring out in the questions? Next year, we are creating energy exhibits. Our whole focus is on making sure we teach people about green energy, and it is very, very aligned with Monroe County's efforts to communicate to people about making sure that we don't use up our precious resources in a way that is not good for the county. So we're looking forward to inviting you over to see the energy exhibits before we open them to the public. And our whole next summer, spring and summer, will be energy. And I know that you'll enjoy learning about it.
Before I let the Executive Director go, I did want to say that I appreciate that you've given me the opportunity to survive the Titanic and to catch...
Did you survive?
I survived
Great.
the Titanic, and I did catch 2 criminals, so the streets are safer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Our next presentation will be Scott Adair, Chief Financial Officer, who is here to present the 2011 proposed Monroe County budget as it pertains to planning and economic development. And with that, I will leave the chair for the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Holland, for the opportunity to present to the Planning and Economic Development Committee this evening the 2011 County Executive's proposed budget. As everyone on the floor is aware, we have 2 components to our budget, an operating budget and a grant budget. And the first slide in your handouts this evening is the proposed 2011 operating budget of $931.7 million, approximately an $18 million increase from the prior year. The majority of that change comes in mandated services. You'll notice a $24 million change in mandated services from 2010. That is predominantly driven by the payment to our sharing partners increasing this year, an increased caseload in DHS, and the increased costs that the county is participating in as far as the New York State retirement plan. The non-mandated services are essentially flat, about a $900,000 increase from 2010. This is predominantly made up of just I will call it a smorgasbord of activities going on inside of the non-mandated services, all being adjusted by cost of living. Debt service is down this year, approximately $7 million, and that's due primarily to the refinancing opportunity that the county took advantage of in 2008 in restructuring some of its debt service payments, as well as the decrease in interest costs that we've seen in our most recent borrowings. The non-mandated user fee supported items, those are the areas that are covered by the Monroe Community Hospital, the airport, the solid waste fund, and Pure Waters. On the next slide, we talk about the total expenses. What we're just going to highlight here tonight is really kind of talk about when these items will be covered. There's 8 different functional areas. Each will be covered in the upcoming 7 committee meetings that we have. This evening's committee meeting for Planning and Economic Development is included in the other section. The payment to municipal sharing partners, the $126 million will be covered in the Ways and Means presentation. Public safety will be covered shortly. Actually, the committee starts at 5 o'clock, so we have about 15 minutes for questions and answers, and we'll move on from there. Recreation and education will be covered tomorrow evening. Human services will be covered tomorrow evening. Transportation and environmental services will be covered on Wednesday. The rest of the other services will be covered on December 9th when the public hearing is held for Ways and Means as well. The next component of the operating budget is where does the money actually come from? And as you can see by this pie chart, approximately 38% of it, or $349 million, comes from property taxes. As everyone's aware of here this evening, the property tax rate has been held flat again at $8.99. Where we're seeing our growth from property taxes this year is again an increase in our assessed value across this county of approximately 0.9%. The other areas are relatively self-explanatory. Sales tax is up 6.6% from last year. From last year's budgeted numbers, we've seen about a 5% or 4% increase this year in sales tax, and we're also budgeting a 1% increase based on the actual where we think it's going to end in 2010. You'll also note on here the hospital, aviation, environmental, and charges for other services. Those are areas that are primarily covered in the non-mandated user fee supported items. The grants budget, which does not necessarily pertain as there are no grants items in planning and economic development, is $176.7 million in the proposed 2011 budget, up approximately 1.7% from last year. And this primarily impacts items in human services is the majority of the driver, and the Sheriff's Department is the other piece of that. As you can see by the next slide, where that money actually goes to, and human services is the biggest component in the grants budget, along with health services and then public safety. Rec and Ed also has a small portion for the zoo. As has been discussed many times in the different presentations that we have, we also break out in the budget the mandated versus non-mandated portion. This year, mandated costs consume 82% of the overall budget for the county, and non-mandated costs consume 18%. Breaking those mandated expenses out by functional area, you'll see the 8 functional areas that were listed on the previous slide. The largest component of the mandated expenses is in human services and health services, followed by the payment to municipal sharing partners, and then, or public safety, and then the payment to municipal sharing partners. Non-mandated expenses by functional area, you'll see these are primarily the largest component of this is public safety, with the second largest component being health services. In the other section, we do cover planning and economic development, as a portion of their budget is both mandated and non-mandated. Getting into the charge of this particular committee, the planning and economic development area. As everyone is aware of, planning and economic development focuses on job retention and creation, land use planning, housing and neighborhood preservation, and employment and training services. This is done through its 4 divisions: planning services, economic development, community development, and workforce development, along with its affiliations with COMITA and the Monroe County Industrial Development Corporation. Community development, the Department of Community Development this past year assisted 73 families in providing them assistance for their closing costs or their down payment on a first-time home. The planning division, or planning services in economic development, really is responsible for the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan, as well as green space initiatives managed throughout this county. And the workforce development portion of planning and economic development assisted over 9,000 job seekers through Rochester Works to find employment this past year. You'll note that in this particular area, the overall appropriations are down slightly, approximately $140,000 from last year, and the revenues follow along suit with that, down approximately $110,000. The primarily personal services and benefits. Approximately 77.6% of the expenditures in this department are spent on personal services or personnel and the benefits for those personnel. The final slide in the presentation before we take questions really details out the gross budgets for each of the divisions that I mentioned before. You'll notice that planning services is the largest at $0.77 of $1 million. $650,000 goes towards community development. $44,000 $440,000 goes toward economic development, and $210,000 goes towards workforce development. And that is through a contract with Rochester Works. At that time, Chairman Howland, that concludes my presentation for this committee. We'll be more than willing to take questions.
Okay, at this time, I'll now open the floor to questions. Legislator Monroe.
To some of the more substantive questions. On the, I think it's the third slide, the bottom number's cut off. I think it says 9.2% for environmental.
Through the chair, that is correct, 9.2% for environmental services.
Legislator Esposito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Adair, for the presentation. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, could I just get a little bit more description on the main reason for the reduction in the overall budget for this department? I think it's $140,000.
Through the chair, the overall reduction in appropriations for this particular department, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's primarily driven by personal services and benefits, is a reduction of 2 full-time equivalent positions.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, could you just can you identify what those positions are?
Through the chair, elimination of 1 position to the in community development to properly show the level of compensation for the director.
So the full reduction in personnel services is 1 position, or I thought Scott just said 2. I'm sorry.
And then an early retirement in our community development.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what was the position? I'm sorry.
Community development specialist.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I note that on the revenue side, there's an increase in the amount booked from Rochester Works. Could I get an explanation of that from the administration?
Through the chair, Rochester Works essentially covers the whole cost of that program, so they're just reimbursing for whatever the dollar amounts that are expended in it. So that's for the increase.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, do they, so is it a reimbursement based on how many people we refer to them or how many people they help in general?
Through the chair, it's based on the expenditures incurred by the county to operate that particular program. They reimburse for that.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I note in this year's budget, and we've had this conversation in past years, that the contribution from Comida is increased, albeit reasonably nominally from $260,000 to $265,000. Could I get an explanation through you from the administration?
Through the chair, just for clarification, you're looking for reason for the increase in reimbursement?
Yes.
Through the chair, that is for effectively what's happened in the last year where Comida used to provide the director a vehicle. It is now being provided through the county, and thus that dollar amount was subsequently transferred over from Comida to pay for the car.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you again, in the past I've asked, and I'd like to ask again to see if the thought has changed, as to why we don't increase the contribution from Comida or IDC further to help offset some of the net county support and alleviate some of the taxpayer burden for our economic development activities when each of those entities are revenue generating and have substantial assets.
Through the chair, the thought process behind that is to ensure that the money goes back to the businesses that are paying the fees, and so that we have come up with new programs to assist communities or businesses in the community that are having trouble with finding financing or incentives to either purchase facilities or to buy equipment.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, is there a timetable by which the assets of Comida or MCIDC distribute those funds to entities that are looking for financing? And in the interim, wouldn't it be a wise use of resources to help the economic activities done directly by the county aiding those same businesses?
Through the chair, we're hoping that the funds are used more quickly, which would mean that the businesses are using those to buy fixed assets such as buildings or equipment and create jobs for the citizens in the community.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I certainly share that hope and would encourage you to continue to look at ways in which other entities that are generating revenue and have assets can help offset the burden to the property taxpayer with regards to our economic development activities. And this, I think, could be one in the future we use a little more wisely, and would just ask you to consider that in the future. Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask, I'd like to have someone in the administration refresh my memory. Do we not support Greater Rochester Enterprise through this department's budget?
Through the chair, yes, we do.
And is through you, Mr. Chairman, could you explain where that is in this budget?
Do you know where it's in the economic development? Yeah. What line item? Professional services and economic development, 50,000.
Thank you. And so that is stable compared to previous years. Is that correct? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, that is correct.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the entirety of the county's support of GRE? I thought we were one of the primary sponsors to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Through the chair, that is the entire contribution from the county.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is there a contribution from Comida or another county-affiliated agency?
Through the chair, yes, there is a contribution from Comida in the amount of $100,000.
Thank you very much. That's what I was thinking of, Mr. Chairman. And is that consistent from what it's been in the past years?
Through the chair, last year it was $200,000, and this year it is going to, in our budget, it was approved for $100,000.
Through the Chairman, may I ask the reason for the reduction?
Through the chair, the board approved $100,000 as a result of fees being down in from the amount of projects that were approved last year.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was interrupted. I'm sorry. So can you explain that again?
Sure. Through the chair, the amount of the contribution was reduced as a result of less projects being done through the IDA.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, is that a result of the fact that the state does not allow the IDA to finance nonprofit projects, as we've discussed in this committee before?
Through the chair, I think that's a result of just the downturn in the economy.
Okay, and through you, Mr. Chairman, does MCIDC contribute to GRE?
Through the chair, no.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, if the economy were to pick up or our change in county law that allows the IDC now to finance nonprofit projects picks up, is it reasonable to expect that perhaps IDC might be a revenue source or a contributor to GRE and the work they're doing?
Through the chair, that would be a board decision, and I really can't speculate about it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the answers, and I would certainly encourage you to continue to fund GRE and the great work they do jointly with the county, the city, the state, and for our entire region. A $100,000 hit is pretty substantial towards their budget, and obviously, I think, detrimental to our regional economic development efforts. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask about the hotel-motel tax revenue. I note that there is a decrease this year, and I'd like to ask through you to the administration as to the reason why.
Through the chair, if you could clarify the question, we're not clear if you're asking about hotel-motel tax revenue or the appropriations or the subsidies that are paid out of hotel-motel tax revenues.
Either would be fine, but through you, Mr. Chairman, I was specifically asking just in the reduced amount listed on page 64. It's my understanding that that is both the revenue and the total expenditure.
Through the chair, the amount that's listed in the budget book is what will actually be provided to the agencies. That's down because the debt service is down for the cultural district this year.
Okay. And through you, Mr. Chairman, could you just explain why the debt service is down for the cultural district?
Through the chair, as part of the process of paying down that debt, the principal and interest payments has been reduced over the years.
Okay. So that, I mean, it's a pretty substantial drop. That's just an expected payment reduction.
Chair, through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, on the same subject, why does the budget no longer include the actual hotel-motel tax revenues received?
Through the chair, it was a decision to eliminate that presentation from the budget book. That information is available at anyone's request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I'd like to request as much of the most recent actual revenue received for the hotel-motel tax, please. There is an issue that's been arisen, and I note you commented on in the paper yesterday with regards to the authorized agencies that are funded from this section of the budget, from the hotel-motel room occupancy tax. Can you explain why the $1.2+ million of payments to those agencies from this revenue source have been zeroed out in the appropriations at the back of the book? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, certainly I can explain that. It's actually a consistency issue because if you noted in the past, we've never presented the appropriation to pay for the commitment out of hotel-motel tax for things such as GRVA, the Sports Authority, the Sports Development Corporation, and the Monroe County Fair and Recreation Association. We've decided to handle that consistently now and eliminate that appropriation from the budget book. The budget book still is the authorization to provide those funds that come from hotel-motel tax directly to those agencies. But a standalone appropriation is not necessary since it was not necessary for the others.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I gathered most of that from your quote in the paper. And I recognize that in past years, although it's not entirely clear to me, that some of those other agencies that you mentioned that are funded with hotel-motel room tax do not have appropriations in the budget. But can you just explain in a little more depth through you, Mr. Chairman, how the county can receive a revenue and presumably expend money to whomever and not have it listed in the budget? That sort of seems a little confounding.
Through the chair, it's based on the same simple principle of how the sales tax is handled. When we make a payment to a sharing partner such as the city, the towns, the villages, or the school districts, we do not carry an appropriation for that unless it is the payment that's required under the municipal agreement regarding the sales tax sharing payments. Otherwise, we don't include a sales tax. We don't include sales tax appropriations either. This is the same identical, virtually identical authorization from a sales tax perspective or a hotel motel tax perspective, and thus we are treating all of these revenue sources consistently amongst in the budget book at this point in time, which we were not in the past.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the effort and the intent to be consistent. However, where's the authorization that allows you to collect the revenue, be it sales tax or hotel motel tax, and not identify it as a revenue or an expense for the county's purposes? How is that, through you, Mr. Chairman, how is that something you're able to do?
Through the chair, the revenue that comes in regarding that is simply a pass-through to the other entities. The county effectively is not taking constructive receipt of that money. It's done through a contract where we're passing that money along to the other agencies, and thus we do not believe that we need an appropriation in the budget book. I guess we're getting into a little bit of a definition here, and our intention is that the presentation in the front of the budget book is to delineate exactly who is getting that money, and that is part of the process that you are approving. What we are attempting to do, though, is consistently handle the appropriation side of it, whether it be from sales tax or hotel motel tax, and then we provide the detail as to where those dollars are going to, just as we do with sales tax, that it's going to the city or it's going to towns, villages, so forth. Of the whole $400 million that's collected in sales tax, we're just trying to handle these two items in a consistent manner across the board, because what we wind up happening is that each and every year we go back to try and research why we do it differently, and there's never really been a good reason as to why it's been done differently. This year was the year that we said, you know what, it's time to handle this thing consistently, whether it be hotel motel tax or sales tax, and that's what we've done in this budget.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, in order to handle consistently, why wouldn't you just list all of the tax revenues and all of the expenditures related to them accordingly in the back of the budget?
Through the chair, we're doing that in the front of the budget because those are dollars that are not quote-unquote county dollars. They're being provided to other agencies. This would be the same thing as now all of a sudden changing it to provide the $400 million in revenue in the front of the book for sales tax in the back of the book and an appropriation to all of those entities. There's no requirement that says we have to do that. As a matter of fact, we do this. We present both the revenue, the budgetary, the total dollars coming in and going out in our financial statements, which is the only place that is a requirement to be done. It is not required in this budget book.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I appreciate that, but the hotel motel room tax is a county tax. It's a 6% tax that the county levies based on the activity at the tourism-affiliated entities around town. How do you consider that not to be something that the county collects and then decides to distribute in this manner?
Through the chair, it's the same exact piece of the 4% of sales tax. The 4% is county tax.
Correct. It's
the same deal. What we're doing is handling it consistently, regardless of whether it's sales tax or hotel motel tax. There's no, the reality of this is what we're trying to do is treat them all consistently. The last piece of this that was inconsistent was the $1.2 million in appropriations. Rather than confusing everyone by throwing in $320 million of sales tax revenue and appropriations into this booklet and throw in the other $5 million of hotel motel tax, we thought the simplest answer was to eliminate the $1.2 million, the one item that remained in the budget book. Again, the appropriation is not there. The detail and where we are asking for authorization to spend that hotel motel tax is in this book.
And so you're saying, through you, Mr. Chairman, by virtue of the fact that the legislature approves the entire budget, including the front section with the summary and the tax analysis on page 64, that gives the administration the authority to make those expenditures?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, then why is it that there are still components of the hotel motel tax expenditures, albeit the administrative portion and the debt service to the cultural districts, that are still included in the back of the budget with listed as revenue for hotel motel tax and listed as appropriations?
Through the chair, that's because the county is handling those dollars. That's what the county is taking to pay debt service that the county has incurred. as well as the administrative fee that the county has incurred to monitor this program.
And so, okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, explain to me this. The $6.1 million of expenditures from the hotel room occupancy tax that you're calling pass-throughs that are not listed in the back as appropriations, are they included in the $931 million spending plan for the county?
Through the chair, no.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, the county is making expenditures, and I assume these entities like the Museum and Science Center that just spoke to us consider this county funding. They're not included in the county budget. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I'll beg to differ with that. They are included in the county budget. There's not an appropriation for them in the county budget book, but they are included in the county budget.
And so I presume then, that if they're not included in the spending plan, that this spending is not included in any of the mandated, non-mandated debt service or non-mandated user fee supported sections of the budget. Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, that would be correct.
In comparison to the 2010 budget, page 64, which you're listing as the authorization to make these payments, the 2010 budget number is substantially less than the amount we passed in the 2010 budget. Through you, Mr. Chairman, can you explain why that is?
Through the chair, can we ask for clarification on that question?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chairman, on page 64 of this year's budget, in the second section, we'll look at specifically the authorized agencies line. It lists for the 2010 budget number, $1,269,016. The 2010 budget that we adopted has that same amount. Presumably they would be identical at $1,462,593. Why is there a discrepancy? Through you, Mr. Chairman. Why are the numbers not the same?
Through the chair, the reason for that is the Cultural Commission development, that debt service piece was combined to get it to that 1.4 in last year's budget. This year, the $120,000 for the Cultural District Development Center is separated out from that. That's the reason for the difference there.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the appropriations that are presumably approved but aren't appropriations on page 64 in the budget, is the administration required to spend that same amount, that exact amount, or is that at their discretion and they could spend less if let's say, hotel, motel room occupancy tax did not come in at the rate as expected?
Through the chair, we are committed in the 2011 proposed budget to provide that amount of funding to those agencies regardless of where the hotel motel tax comes in at.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, has that been the case in past years?
Through the chair, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, what is the approximate total amount of revenues received from the 6% hotel motel room occupancy tax?
Through the chair, I'll provide the actual detail to you as a follow-up to this, but it was approximately $6.4 million in 2009, and we are currently projecting about $6.5 million in 2010. We're waiting for the fourth quarter to be complete and for those returns to be filed.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. And through you, Mr. Chairman, let's say the economy picks up and people flood to our hotels to go see the Museum and Science Center and all the other wonderful organizations we have here, and we collect more than we expect in the budget. What happens to that extra money? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, if that was to happen in 2011, that money would become part of the general fund. It would be a revenue to the general fund.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, the money that does not go over and above what we budget, does that not come into the general fund as well?
Through the chair, I need you to repeat or just clarify that question for me because I'm not sure I followed it.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the money, let's say we receive the exact amount budgeted. Does the money from the hotel motel room tax not come into the general fund of the county?
Through the chair, the simple answer is no. The dollar amounts that are listed in the budget for administrative fees and the debt service would come into the county's general fund to pay those expenses. Nothing else would come into the general fund if it came in at the exact same dollar amount that was required to provide funding to all the agencies listed on the sheet that you're speaking about.
And so then, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, where does it go? I mean, we collect $6.1 million approximately and pass it through to these agencies as described in this spending plan. Where does the money go to and then from? Is there another fund? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I apologize. Through the chair, I apologize. I did not understand your original question. The dollars come into the county and they are passed through to other agencies. They do not transact, from an accounting standpoint, they transact through the general fund. From a budgetary standpoint, they're not on budget, so they are something that are handled separately.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to understand, through you, Mr. Chairman. What is the difference between an accounting standpoint and a budgeting standpoint, between money that comes into the general fund and gets paid as agreed to by this legislative body to entities in our county? How is there a difference between what you can push off budget and what's supposed to be in the spending plan, presumably that taxpayers of this county would look at to figure out how much money they're spending and how much they're being asked to spend?
Through the chair, there are, and I think we've gone down this road before, especially regarding sales tax, there are specific accounting requirements that require, there's a GASB standard that requires us to recognize all of those pass-through dollars, both coming in and out of the general fund. So there's accounting rules that we have to follow in order to have a clean opinion from our auditors during the time point of going through audit. What we're doing here is simply, this is a revenue that is not for the county, it's for another agency. We are providing the authorization to give that money to them in this budget book. We're just not including an appropriation for the authorized agencies at this point in time, similar or exactly the same way that we've done in the past regarding all of the other hotel motel tax or sales tax.
Okay. I appreciate that in your eyes it seems like it's a revenue neutral thing that we're just passing through, but I think from the standpoint of reality and what the people would expect their budget to show, this is money that we receive, this is money that we then choose to distribute. I think it should be in the budget. And on this topic, in the comparison of the grouping of budget expenditures, mandated, non-mandated, debt service, and non-mandated user fee supported, from 2010 to 2011, I think was the first slide you showed, is the payment to authorized agencies included in the 2010 number for non-mandated expenditures?
Through the chair, yes, it is.
So it's included in 2010, and through you, Mr. Chairman, is it included in 2011?
Through the chair, there is no appropriation in 2011, so it's not included in non-mandated in 2011.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the answers from the administration and getting a little bit more to the bottom of this. I'm sure we'll address it a little further in future, but those are all the questions I have at this time.
Legislator Monroe.
Mr. Chair, just a couple of quick questions. Am I to understand this correctly that 100% of the grants budget is considered mandated?
Through the chair, for 2011, 100% of the grants budget is mandated, yes.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, there's nothing in there that the county has the option of not doing?
Through the chair, no.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, just one more question. What percentage of that, of those mandates come from the state of New York?
Through the chair, I'll have to get back to you on that exactly. I do not know which is state or federally grant mandated, but I believe it is close to probably the same percentages that we use in the prior presentation. It's probably in the 80 to 85% range.
And just another quick one, Mr. Chair. Through you, so the remainder, I'm assuming, is federal?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you.
Questions? I'll call the presentation closed then. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the October 25th, 2010 minutes before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. Is there any other matters to come before this committee? There being none, there being no further business, the November 29th, 2010 meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee is scheduled for January 3rd, 2011.